As painful as this might be, we're going to look at some of the free agent signings over the entire NHL that the Ducks may have missed out on. All of that on this edition of Locked On Anaheim Ducks.
You're Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How's it going, everyone? Welcome to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jason J.D. Hernandez. I've been covering hockey for well over a decade, and this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. Visit FANDUEL.COMand to get started. So I've been covering hockey for over a decade, have contributed part-time to Defend the Nest, also the PA announcer for the Coachella Valley Firebirds, an affiliate of the Seattle Kraken, who made a couple of moves. Every other team on day one of free agency, every other team besides the Ducks made a signing in day one of free agency. And I'm not just talking about re-signing players. I'm not talking about the re-signing of Vakanainen, and I'm not talking about the re-signing of Leeson. No, I'm talking about unrestricted free agents. And the Ducks wound up with a big goose egg. So I know this is going to be painful, but this is NHL, like across the NHL. I want to focus on some of the names that the Ducks missed out on. And I mean, there's some really painful names on there that I think the Ducks could have legitimately picked up. Before I get into those, I do want to talk about one trade that went across around that same day. And this one I think the Ducks could have pulled something for. Well, there was the Jacob Chikrin, Nick Jensen trade between the Caps and the Sens. That one the Ducks could have gotten done. Jake Gensel getting traded from Carolina to Tampa Bay. That one hurt. And then there was a trade that went down fairly recently, actually. I mean, Edmonton and Buffalo. Buffalo got Ryan McLeod and Ty Tullio for Matt Savoy. That's not a bad change for the Oilers or the Sabres. I think both teams are going to benefit from that one. And then we had, just a lot of signings, and even still some solid signings in the last day or so. So I'm going to start from the beginning and some of the UFAs that did stand out big time to me. The first one I really need to get out there. Sam Reinhart got re-signed by the Florida Panthers. I was hoping that he would test the waters, but he wound up going back to Florida, and why wouldn't he? But that contract, 8 years, $69 million. If it was going to take that much for the Ducks to get Sam Reinhart, that would have been a tough pill to swallow. I'm going to be honest here. Is that an overpay? Nah, I don't know. He was very good in the Stanley Cup final. He was. There was a couple other signings. I mean, there was a lot of signings that first day that just made me go, whoa. Victor Arvidsson, he's going to the Oilers. He's going to bolster that Oilers lineup. They're already bolstered enough. Arvidsson, 2 years, $8 million, so $4 million per. Not a bad contract. Cam Talbot going from the Kings to the Detroit Red Wings. Good for Detroit. Bad for the Kings. I think the Kings did not have a good offseason so far. This big one, this I thought at the time was fine. It's a fine contract. Jake DeBrusk going to Vancouver. 7 years, $38.5 million. 5.5 per season. You know, I like that one. I do like that one. 7-year deal. He's 26, 27 years old. Had a solid year with Vancouver last season. Or not Vancouver, Boston. Had a solid year with Boston going to Vancouver. Jake DeBrusk has been part of the heartbeat of that Boston Bruins team. And Vancouver just got better. They could low-key be one of those up-and-coming teams that's ready for prime time. Right up there with Edmonton. let's see, what else was there? Other ones that stood out for me that I thought was pretty solid. Mike Amadio going to Ottawa, 2.6 per season. That one wasn't bad. Alex Carrier, I mentioned for Nashville. I mentioned this on the last podcast. Adding Carrier to that already potent Nashville offense, they're going to be a deep team, folks. And they've already got a lot of talent from the Milwaukee Admirals. So Nashville could be a force to be reckoned with even next season. But the next 2 seasons, watch out for Nashville. Can you tell them a little bit just like it kind of hurts me a little bit that all these signings took place. Sean Monahan going to Columbus. They had a lot of money to spend. They actually spent it. 5 years, $27.5 million. 5.5 for Sean Monahan. That might be one that I don't completely agree with. I think that's a little much for someone that is projected to be a third liner. I think it's a bit much. His career high in points is 82 points, but this was 5 years ago, and he is on the downturn. He's about to turn 30 years old. I think opening night is when he turns 30, and he seemed to slow down a bit last season with Winnipeg and Montreal. So, 5.5. That one, I think, is not going to age very well for Columbus. So maybe good that the Ducks didn't pull the trigger on that one. One that I would have liked to have seen him pull the trigger on was Nikita Zadorov. Zadorov wanted term. 6 years, $30 million. That I feel is an overpay. Another contract that I think is not going to age well is Jacob Slavin getting an 8-year deal in Carolina. That one's not going to age well. Sean Walker, this I think is a good deal. The Ducks could have gotten this one done. Sean Walker going to Carolina for $3.5 million per season. Solid one. What were some other, I guess, just notable ones that I want to talk about? Teuvo Teravainen going to Chicago. That was a big one. Brett Pesce going to the Devils. 6 years, $33 million. I consider that an overpay. Ducks dodged the bullet there. Anthony Duclair only got 4 years, $14 million. That's solid. If it was only that much money for Anthony Duclair going to the Islanders, why not go after that one? Also, why not go after Brandon Montour a little bit more aggressively? Seattle paid a lot of money for Brandon Montour. They did have the cap space, but this is still a lot of money. 7 years, $50 million. Montour got paid. He got that bonus thanks to winning the Stanley Cup. Montour is going to help the Seattle Kraken. I think Montour is still very good at 30 years old, and I feel like he's in his prime or entering his prime right now. He's kind of one of those, I don't want to say a late bloomer, but he seems to be getting better. He's been solid the last 2 seasons, and I can only see this contract going well for the first 4, maybe 5 seasons for Seattle, but his age 36, 37 seasons, that one's going to be a tough pill to swallow. Do want to mention this. Good for Sam Carrick getting paid by the New York Rangers. 3 years, $3 million. $1 million per season for Sam Carrick in a Rangers uniform. That's a steal. That's a friggin' steal. I cannot believe that he only went for $1 million per season for 3 seasons. He got the stability he wanted, so good for Sam Carrick. There's a lot of signings that I kind of want to go over a little more in depth. So what I'm going to do, head to the first intermission right now and talk about some more signings, and especially the ones that kind of hurt a little bit. We'll get to those on the other side. And now a brief word from FanDuel. And folks, it is the summertime, and I love sports, but with the playoffs over, we've got so few games, and the sports aren't quite sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going, especially baseball, whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. You got futures. You got World Series futures. Are the Dodgers going to win it? How about the Baltimore Orioles? They're looking good. The Royals are a big surprise. Could they be the sleeper this season? This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FANDUEL.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and the official sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. And please gamble responsibly. Welcome back to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, you are locked in with Jason JD Hernandez. Okay, now I'm going to focus on the signings that really might have gotten away, in my opinion. And again, this is all first day. All of them that I've mentioned, all in the first day. It still hurts. Yuri Slafkovsky getting the extension for Montreal. That one we saw happening. This one, I'm going to be honest. I see this as an overpay because I think this player is not going to wind up with first line or even second line minutes. Elias Lindholm. Now, he's a very good player, very good right winger. Had a solid season with Vancouver, more so in the playoffs. He had a good playoff with the Vancouver Canucks. But before that, he was kind of going on the downhill with the Calgary Flames, and I do think his best years are behind him. Elias Lindholm getting a 7-year deal worth, you ready for this? $54.25 million. So Elias Lindholm, Hampus Lindholm. A lot of money. Elias got $7.75 per season. I know the salary cap is supposed to go up, and I know there's going to be money going off the books in Boston, but that still feels like an overpay to me. This one the Ducks could have done. The Ducks should have gotten this one done, and I think this one was on a few people's radar, so I want to talk about this for a minute. Shane Gostisbehere got signed by the Carolina Hurricanes for 3 years, $9.6 million. Now, there were some that said Ghost is a little bit out of his prime and that he had a couple of lousy seasons. I don't think he had a bad season in Detroit. He was just in Detroit. Now, gone are the days of a point per game. I mean, he barely had a point per game for maybe 1.5 seasons, and that was it. And that was when he was in Philadelphia. Arizona, we're not going to talk about that. But Detroit, he was solid. 56 points in 81 games. I'd call that a solid season. And for someone that could wind up being just a second pairing for Carolina, that's a good deal. That's very good. I thought the Ducks could have gotten him. Actually, I did look at Ghost and said they could get him for 3 years, maybe $10 million. In my head, I went 3 years, $10 million. That's not a bad signing. I would have gone for that. That one I think hurts a little bit more because the Ducks could always use more transition D. They could always use someone on that right side because Ghost is, I mean, he is both sides. I mean, he is primarily a lefty, but he can go both sides. You can never have enough defense. And honestly, I would have rather they went after Gostisbehere instead of really anyone else. So that would have been cool to try to get Ghost for that price. But I get why they wouldn't, because they have plenty of left-handed shots and they're going for a different kind of veteran. They're going for more grit. But Gostisbehere, he can put the puck in the net, and also one of the better passing defensemen. I was impressed with him in Detroit. So just one of those things I would have liked to have seen him become a Duck, but I get why they didn't go after him. Someone that I think the Ducks could have gone after for a couple of years, but I get this. Adam Henrique was an unrestricted free agent. He's going back to Edmonton for 2 years, $6 million. Ducks could have gotten him if they wanted, but Henrique, I think, wants to go for that ring. He wants it. And it wasn't going to happen in Anaheim. Edmonton is his best chance. and they have a good shot of going back to the Stanley Cup final this coming season. So that one hurts. I mentioned Marchessault on the previous podcast. Ducks tried to go after Marchessault, did not get him. Someone else that I think the Ducks could have really gone after, aside from Stamkos. You ready? I'm going to be careful here. Tyler Toffoli. Toffoli is 32 years old. I would have given him 3 years. The Sharks gave him 4 years, $24 million. That's a lot of money for an aging winger. He is still very good, but I feel like $6 million per at age 32 is probably not going to age well for the San Jose Sharks, who are in the middle of their rebuild. So that one, I think the Ducks dodged a bullet there. One guy that I think they did miss out on was Chandler Stevenson, another talented winger from Vegas, going also to the Seattle Kraken. They offered him 7 years, $43.75 million. So almost $44 million, $6.25 per season. Is that an overpay by Seattle? I think in the next 3-4 years, that contract is going to age very well for Seattle. And again, the cap is going to go up quite a bit for the next couple of seasons, barring any bad disasters. That one the Ducks could have gotten, and they missed out on that one. Speaking of missing out on folks, Victor Hedman going back to Tampa. Vladimir Tarasenko was right there. And this is after day one. Now we're going to the signings that the Ducks really could have gone after post day one. Okay, there was not many names out there that were left in free agency, and one of those was Vladimir Tarasenko. I saw a couple of Ducks fans on Twitter say, maybe go after Tarasenko. I know he's a bit over the hill, a bit out of it, but maybe just someone that you can go, he's serviceable. He can help a team. He's won big time before. Yes, he's 32, but you can possibly get him on 2-3 years. He just won a cup in Florida. He won a cup in St. Louis. He's got 2. That's the kind of player that you would love to bring on the Ducks, that championship pedigree. And they didn't land him either. Tarasenko's going to the Detroit Red Wings, 2 years, $9.5 million. Would you have been okay with Tarasenko going to the Ducks for 2 years or 3 years? Honestly, I mean, I would have said yes to Tarasenko. He does still play almost every game. The last 3 seasons, he's not missed that many games. There's been like slight nagging injuries, but for the most part, he's been in the lineup. He's contributed. He's almost a point a game. Let me repeat that. The last 3 seasons, he's almost a point a game in the regular season. Last year, in 76 games, 56 points. Year before that, 69 games, 50 points. Year before that, 75 games, 82 points. So still just, I mean, he's under a point a game the last couple seasons, but still contributing. That name was out there on Monday. That name was out there on Tuesday. The Ducks could have picked someone up. They went after Jansen Harkins on free agency. Vladimir Tarasenko was right there. I think if there's any name that I think the Ducks could have gotten a solid deal on, I mean, $4.7 million for an almost point per game guy, I would have taken that for 2-3 seasons, and Tarasenko could have really guided everyone on that team. Another talented winger that would have helped the Ducks immediately. So I don't know if that's a name that y'all are thinking that maybe the Ducks could have picked him up. I would have liked to have seen the Ducks take a chance on him. That's one name that I would have liked to see. All right, we're up against it, so we're going to head into the second intermission, and I'm going to talk just about a couple of more signings that took place across the league and just final thoughts overall on free agency or the lack thereof. Stay locked in. Welcome back to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, you're locked in with Jason JD Hernandez, and we're going to keep this segment rather short for reasons, but just letting you know that don't forget to tune in to previous podcasts. Previously, I had talked about the Ducks free agency and the Ducks trades and who they signed, and this is more of an NHL-centric podcast, talking about some of the other signings across the league. But I do have some thoughts on just the signings in general. Okay. The Ducks did try to hit a home run and whiffed on pretty much everyone. I will say that at least Paverbeek didn't go down not swinging. At least he took a couple of shots. At least he took shots, and by most accounts, at least he tried to land some of those big players. So that I cannot fault Paverbeek for. However, some of those other smaller signings that did happen after day one, I don't know what exactly happened in day 2, day 3, day 4, when there was still some decent names out there, and the Ducks whiffed on pretty much all of those ones as well. So I'm not so blind as to not be disappointed in this. Yes, I am going to say that I'm a little disappointed that there wasn't at least somewhat of a bigger splash in free agency. Maybe not a player that's going to get 8-9 million, but at least someone that you can kind of hang your hat on and at least get like 4 or 5 million for a couple of years. Someone, I mean, I'm still going to go back to Vladimir Tarasenko, who got a solid enough contract, and the Ducks could have matched that easily and gotten some kind of scoring potency on that middle six. That would have been totally fine, especially on the wing, because right now the Ducks depth chart is not looking as good as we would have hoped before this season. Now, I know I talked to a number of folks at the NHL draft, and I remember in particular Mike, Ryan, and Nick, who at the end of day one of the draft, they all said pretty unanimously, let Pat cook. Let Pat cook. This was after day one of the draft. He had a good draft. I'll be honest. The draft was good, at least. Those first 2 picks, very solid. Second and third round picks. You know what? Those were good too. The trades the Ducks made to move around in the draft were good enough trades that I would, if I were to grade the Ducks as far as the draft is concerned, I would give them high marks. But it ends there, because free agency is another part of it, and you cannot just hang your hat on draft picks like the Ducks have done year in and year out. You have to eventually make those moves. You have to eventually take those kind of risks. That's what good teams do rely on their draft picks, but that's what separates a good team from a great team, is making those key signings and taking risks. And whether Paverbeek tried to take those risks, we don't know. We don't know how many people that he tried to go after in free agency. It might have been more than just those 2 or 3 names that I mentioned. It could be 10, it could be 12. But the fact that he swung out on almost all of them, or struck out on almost all of them, I don't want to say it's a telling sign, but it's a little bit, I guess the word I'm going to use here is not disappointing, but discouraging. It's discouraging that we are not moving as far forward as we would like at this stage of the rebuild. The Ducks have a lot of money. They have a ton of money to spend, and they're going to have to spend it soon. But I also look at this year's free agent market, and it's decent enough. There was some good names that went out there, but I look more forward to 2025 and what that is going to look like. There's a lot of talented young players that are going to be free agents in 2025. Now, a lot of them are UFAs. I mean, I'll just toss out a couple of the bigger names. that only have 1 year left on their contracts. Mitch Marner obviously is going to be the big one. Mikko Rantanen's another big one. He might stay in Colorado. Leon Draisaitl, he could stay in Edmonton, depending on what happens with the Oilers this season. And this is a big season for the Oilers. They're going to have to win this year. Otherwise, their window might close sooner rather than later. And just another couple of names I'm going to throw out there. Brock Besser, going to be a free agent, only has 1 year left on his contract. He's going to garner some attention. And even though he's a bit on the older side, Brock Nelson had a pretty solid season with the New York Islanders. He could get a good enough 3-year deal, and that might be worth it for the Ducks as well. Konechny's another name out there. So as far as the talent of free agents next year compared to this year, I would say overall it's a little bit better next season. So that's kind of where I'm going to hang my hat a little bit, is what the Ducks can do in next year's offseason, both via the draft and especially via free agency. So we have to have patience, but let's let Pat cook next season. And I think next year is going to be his biggest task and his biggest challenge. Let's see what he does with it. In the meantime, I think we're still in the midst of another long season. This could be a season where the Ducks, unfortunately, are going to miss the playoffs, and it could be a painful season. And I've said this time and time again, have a lot of patience, folks. With that said, we're going to wrap up this episode. Thank you all so much for listening. Thanks for watching. Don't forget, this podcast is free and available across all platforms, including Stitcher, Spotify, Odyssey, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, among others. You could follow the podcast ad-free on Amazon. Also on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. You could follow the show, or you can follow me on Twitter X at StimpyJD. The show's Twitter X is at LO_Ducks, and you could email me at lockedonanaheimducks@gmail.com. And once again, thank you all for your continued support, and thanks for all the listens and watches. It is so greatly appreciated. For Locked On Anaheim Ducks, I'm Jason JD Hernandez, saying have a great rest of the day. Please remember to be safe out there, be kind to one another, and Ducks fly together.